Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for October 4th, 2024. And we're going to be doing the Week 5 NFL picks, Thursday thoughts. Before we get to our co-host for tonight, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see here in the merch store, we have a ton of t-shirts, even a coffee mug. So it's a great way to support the show. And I, of course, am wearing a Walter Football shirt because that's all I have, except for 3 shirts. And I actually have my brother-in-law's engagement party on Saturday, and my wife said, you have to pick out something nice to wear. And unfortunately, none of this is going to fly, so I'll have to find something in my closet. Also, please consider super chats, super stickers.
Well, Walter, pick out one of those shirts that's been ironed and pressed.
I don't do any of that.
That'll be sort of like a dress shirt.
I don't fold my clothes or anything. I just get them out of the dryer and hang them up.
Either that, or maybe you get your wife to like knit some buttons onto the shirt so it looks like it's a button-up shirt.
I don't see that happening, unfortunately. So I might have to buy something tomorrow. But also, please consider super chats, super stickers. It's a great way to support the show. John Sanders. You guys have been so awesome with your contributions. John Sanders yesterday at the 411 super chat. Also in the past, Stuart Griffin, Andy Z, Kevin Kovac, Degenon, Germ, you guys have been so great. Can't make an eagle. So any further contributions would be appreciated because, like I always say, YouTube ads pay nothing. So that really keeps the show going. Also, consider buying my books on Amazon. We have Jerks of the College Years here. It's my 3rd book. I make fun of people that I saw at Penn State for 6 years, and so you can see on the cover. Also, I wrote an expose about Aaron Rodgers' MVP award in 2020 and how Brett Favre tried to sabotage it. So this was my 2nd book. I also have another book also on Amazon called The Safety and a Field Goal. So it's another way to support the show. So without further ado, we are joined by Andy Iskoe. Andy, how are you? And do you want to give a brief introduction for those who don't know who you are?
Sure. It's good to be with you again, Walter. Of course, Walter, you've been a good football handicapper selected, and who I have proxy for out here in Las Vegas for many years now in the major contests, and we've gotten to know each other over the years, so I appreciate being on. And for those who may not know who I am, I have been in Las Vegas as a professional handicapper, player, etc. since, in Vegas since 1991. So I've seen the city change considerably. I've seen the sportsbook industry locally and, of course, internationally, but certainly and nationally for that matter, but certainly locally change over the years. Not necessarily for the better, and I can mean that necessarily BETTER or BETTOR. They might both apply because some of the things that the sportsbooks have done, and understandably so because it's their business, but the rules that they've changed, especially, for example, the vig that you pay on teasers right now is at like an all-time high in the for NFL teasers, especially because the public has done so well. And I've done a lot of research and reporting on that kind of information over the years. But I've like I said, I've been here since 1991. So this is a football season number 34 for me in Las Vegas. And I always get excited as if it's like it's kind of like Christmas and New Year's rolled into one on that opening Thursday night game.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. You're also at thelogicalapproach.com. So we'll talk about that at the end. I have to ask you, what's the vig on the teasers? Kind of curious.
Surprisingly, one of the major books in town. It used to be even money on 6-point teasers, minus 110 on 6.5, and minus 120 on 7-point teasers. Now it's minus 120 on 6-point teasers. It goes as high on I've seen as high as minus 140 on 6-point teasers now in the NFL, which makes it a very, very difficult proposition. It almost has me considering now looking for situations. And teasers is all about numbers, not the teams necessarily, but the numbers. For example, and many people are aware of this who play teasers, they'll take, like for example, tonight, a 2.5-point underdog, Tampa Bay. They'll take the plus 6, not the plus 6.5 or 7, but plus 6, and it covers the key numbers of 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. Going from plus 2.5 to plus 8.5. So I want to do a little bit more research because it's almost now at the point now where you can still get plus money on 3-team teasers, but the principle of teasing from plus 2.5 to plus 8 still has value. And as a matter of fact, I'll have some very interesting statistics to share about this season when it comes to teasers and underdogs when we get to a couple of the games to which it applies.
Okay, yeah, that'd be music to my ears if we got plus 100 or even minus 110 on teasers, because
Years ago.
the best I know of online is Bookmaker has minus 120 and DraftKings is minus 120. Everything else is either minus 125 or minus 130. I think I even saw a minus 135 out there, which is seems crazy to me. But yeah, we had Tampa on the teaser tonight. I teased it with both the Jets and the Bengals, and I plan on trying to middle those. So, yeah, we'll get to
those
those
are
games.
exactly the kind of games that I'm looking at. And I'll share with you right now. I just before we came on, I said, you know what, underdogs have been doing really well, and we know about all the big underdogs that have knocked out Survivor players, etc., and have covered the spread. But I want to take a look at the small underdogs. So I did a little query on my database for the first 4 weeks of the season. And I think this is actually one of the few times that it hasn't worked. In fact, there have been 12 instances where a team has been on the road and the closing line. I use the Westgate because I've been using that for years and years, for like 20 years, since I used to use the Stars before they closed in the fall of 2006, where the line closes and that the road team is an underdog of less than 5 points. Actually, this year it'd be less than 4.5 points because there haven't been any 4.5. I don't think there have been any 5-point underdogs, but closing lines. In any event, there have been 12 such instances, and the underdog, the road underdog in that case, is 9-3 straight up, but they're now 12-0 against the spread. Wow. In those games. And you would normally think, and the reason I bring that up is that you would think that home favorites laying 2.5, all they have to do is win by a field goal and I cover my 2.5. Well, that minus 2.5, certainly this year, and it goes back not quite to this extent, of course, but 2.5 point home favorites over the years, that's the closing line, have not been as profitable, and I'm talking even money line, as you might normally think, because you're talking about, gee, I get to lay less than a field goal, and we know that field goals are such a big number. In fact, I think games are decided by 3 points, roughly, I think 16 to 18% of the time. But keep in mind, part of that 16 to 18% of the time is when the underdog wins by 3, not the favorite. So when you're talking about the value of the number 3, you got to take a look at it. How many times does a favorite of, say, minus 2.5, minus 3, minus 3.5. How often do they win by 3? That's the more important thing. It's not quite as large as that, as we assume, because most people don't factor take into consideration, factor in that, not quite half the time, but a little bit less than half the time, it's the underdog winning by 3, and so laying 3 points and or buying the half point up or down and paying the extra juice is not necessarily as profitable. It's still profitable, but not to the extent that many people think.
Yeah, I think, this is what you said about 3 hitting so often is why I hate just betting 3.5 point favorites.
No, even in contests.
Yeah, exactly. I try to avoid it. I always say that if you bet a minus 3.5, you need a very good reason to do so, just because it's such a bad line.
You have to think the line should be 6 or 7.
Yeah,
or maybe higher.
Yeah, dating back to 1989, favorites of 3.5 are 48.1% to cover. Yeah. So you can almost not quite, but almost.
And that's probably several hundred examples, because you probably have 10 to 15 3.5 point favorites, home favorites, or favorites in general over the course of a given season. So you're talking 35 years.
Yeah, it's do the math. It's 745 instances there. So it's a pretty 745 instances of.
Okay, yeah. Oh.
So yeah, it's a very big sample size.
That's about 50 instances a year. No, it can't be that many.
It's about 21 a year.
Maybe 15 instances a year.
Yeah. So it's just, like I said, it's something I like to avoid. But the minus 2.5 at home almost seems like it's kind of like a bait for the public. Hey, like you said,
it looks like a gift, and it is for the bookmaker.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into these games. So speaking of 2.5 favorites, although not at home, because this is in London, the Vikings are favored by 2.5 against the Jets. So I have some quick updates for all these games that I wrote down. Just looking at injuries and where the sharp money is going. So no injuries of note in this game, but there's a lot of sharp money on the Jets, and I like this. I like the Jets here at plus 2.5. I'm hoping for a plus 3 at some point. Now the Vikings are 4-0. They've looked great. But I don't know. I think that Aaron Rodgers could solve Brian Flores' defense, whereas Flores is going against young quarterbacks. Rodgers is not going to be fooled by anything he sees. And there was some radical line movement here from the Jets are -1 on the advanced spread, and now they're +2.5, which is we were talking about like the marginal differences of a 3. It's about, you said 18%, but it's for both sides, so it's about like 9% each. So for a line move from a +1 to -2.5, that's a marginal difference of about 7%, which is
now. Are you talking about the Jets being what minus? What was it, 3 at over the summer or last week?
Oh, last week.
Okay.
Last week. So yeah, so they were -1 ahead of week 4, and now they're +2.5. So 7% marginal difference. So I like the Jets here. I think if they're a +3, I'd like them a lot more, obviously, but I still think they'll win this one outright. What are your thoughts on this game?
I'd probably be on the Jets at +3. I have no interest on either side at the 2.5. I do like the game under the total, especially if you can. I've seen 40.5s out there. If you can get the hook up to 41, I like the under. The Jets defense we know has been very good. It's reflected in the numbers. Minnesota's defense hasn't been all that great as far as yards. The yards allowed metric, where they rank 23rd. But they're allowing under 14, I think 14.5 points a game, which is right near the top of the league, which is very good. So they're making plays on defense, key third down stops and turnovers, etc. So I prefer the under. I'll play it I wouldn't say I'll play it at 40.5 because I'd buy it to 41 if you can. But I still like that game. That game under. I wanted to play the Denver Jets game under last week, and I ended up waiting until late when that line actually went up a little bit. So I got it under 38, and of course that was never really in doubt. But I want to say that line was as low as 36 at one point. I've realized even with the lack of scoring this year, I still find it very difficult to play under a total. I don't like I'll play under 38 and marginally under 37, but I will not play 36.5 or less under.
Okay. Yeah, I've never been good at totals. I feel like I'm like 50.2% all time on totals. So I try to stay away from it unless it's like a crazy weather situation, which we actually saw last week in that Broncos Jets game.
And that's built into the line, or certainly built into the line movement if the forecast comes out Tuesday or Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Cassandra says, "Free the apron, free the shirt." Yeah, our apron got erased from our merch, so we need to get it back. And he said, "How many times have I said that Walt should use T-shirt proceeds to purchase adult clothes?" I was right the whole time. Well, I always use the proceeds to buy more of my shirts, so I feel like you just have to go back into the business here.
Well, you may have to make an exception. You said tomorrow.
Yeah, well, Saturday's my brother-in-law's.
Unless you start doing the Walter Football men's business wear shirts.
I should make some sport coats. I think it'd be nice. Yeah. high quality sports coats.
Big WF on the lapel.
Exactly. Or it could just be a cheesy and have WFs all over it. Yeah. Be nice. All right, going to the main Sunday slate, we have Panthers at the Bears. So some injury updates here. No Josie Jewell or Shaq Thompson for the Panthers in practice. Damian Lewis, Deontay Johnson, and Robert Hunt were all limited on Thursday after missing practice on Wednesday. So it's good news that they were at least able to come back to practice. If all three were out, I'd be very concerned about the Panthers, especially given the linebacker injuries. But I love the Panthers spot here. First of all, I don't think the Bears are that good. Their defense is pretty solid, but their offense has been so dreadful, and they've been outgained in 3 of the 4 games. They are outgained by the Rams. They could have lost that one if it wasn't for Rams turnovers. They're doubled in yardage by the Titans in week 1. They easily could have lost that game. They should have lost that game. So this 2-2 record, I think, is inflated. Plus, Chicago has to travel to London next week. They have to play the Jaguars. So they could be distracted here for the same reason the Jets were distracted last week. So and Carolina has been better with Andy Dalton. This is the Andy Dalton revenge tour part 2. So I think there's a decent chance Carolina wins this game. I would like to see some of their guys play. So the injury report is going to factor in the unit count, but I will definitely be on Carolina. Who do you like here, Andy?
Yeah, I was saying, the Jets may have been distracted, but, Minnesota wasn't distracted. Now, they did get off to a huge lead and managed to hold on in that game, but, those were the 2 teams that are playing in London this week. So I don't know how much it was the Jets being distracted, such as the weather conditions and going up against an equally solid defense in Denver last week. But it is something to consider. It's certainly not a positive, the fact that they have to travel. The thing with, like Jacksonville, for example, we'll get to that game. They're going to travel, but they know they're going to be there for 2 weeks. So that would be a little bit of a different situation. I didn't have much preference for this game either way. A slight lean towards the Bears, especially if the line's going to stay at 4. I think it opened at 4 at a lot of places. I've seen 3.5s and 4s, and we just talked about the uncomfortableness about the 3.5s. Carolina played, they followed up that stunning upset, that one-sided win against the Raiders, with a decent but losing effort against a very desperate Cincinnati team last week. They still put 24 on the board. But I'm starting to see a little bit improvement in Caleb Williams of the Bears, although I am concerned, and this could be a thing for Carolina, he still gets sacked way too often. Was it 12 or 13 sacks through his first 4 games? So that's what's keeping me off the Bears. But I'm not sure that Carolina has done enough right now to be a small road underdog in this case, even against the Bears going up against a good defense. Because if I have a team that I'm going to back, would I prefer them to have a good offense or a good defense? I prefer a good defense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sue says a lot of the -3 in recent years has been Chargers Saints. I actually typed this in. Since 2020, there have been 9 instances of Chargers and or Saints being favored by 3.5, or I should say or Chargers or Saints being favored by 3.5 or 9 times. So you're right on the money there. It always seems like the Chargers are favored by 3.5, or at least they were. All right, let's get.
Should have been 5, but they took off 1.5 for Brandon Staley.
Yeah, he was,
and it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, he was so horrible. All right, so we kind of touched on this also with the teaser. Ravens at the Bengals. The Ravens are -2.5. It's a lot of sharp money though on the Bengals. No real injury updates here. I still like Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's a little underrated because they got like week 2, they almost beat the Chiefs. If Burrow doesn't fumble, they probably beat the Chiefs. And if they do, they're 2-2, and like no one's even talking about how desperate they might be right now. And they might even be a small favorite. Although Baltimore coming off that huge win against Buffalo may sway that. It would probably be like Ravens -1 if that were the case. But I want to fade Baltimore here coming off that national TV win. Cincinnati, I feel like they have the tools to exploit Baltimore's weaknesses, where the Ravens still have a weak offensive line and pass protection. The Bengals have some very good pass rushers on the edge. To kind of take advantage of that. And then Baltimore's defensive issues are in the secondary. Their cornerbacks are pretty bad. And so Cincinnati, they obviously have the talent.
I was going to say Cincinnati's secondary has to learn to tackle.
Yeah, that's true. Although Baltimore is not throwing. So we'll see if the Ravens...
No, I'm talking about just even on running plays that they've got to learn to tackle a little bit.
Yeah, no, their Cincinnati's inability to tackle I feel like would have an issue against Derrick Henry, but I do think Cincinnati should be able to score pretty easily on Baltimore. So I like the Bengals here. So what are your thoughts here?
No, I'm with you on the Bengals as well. I found interesting, and number one, the defensive stats between the two teams are not all that one-sided. You might think that because Baltimore's known for its defense, but its defense hasn't been as strong this year as it has been in recent years. And another concern that you have, or that I would have for the Ravens defense, is the poor play they showed in the fourth quarter against the Raiders and the Cowboys in back-to-back weeks that cost them the game against the Raiders, and almost, if that game was 65 minutes, Dallas might have come back and completed that comeback. The other thing is that Cincinnati, in all 4 games on a yards per play basis, they've had the edge over their opponents as far as net margin. 1.6 yards per play better than the opposition's, than they allowed, etc. To their offense. So the numbers are Cincinnati is playing better than their numbers suggest. I do have a little bit of a concern about Baltimore's passing game. When you talk about apples and oranges when you're making comparisons, and to me in football, the biggest apples and orange comparison is when you use the metric yards per pass attempt. That's a meaningless statistic, okay? Because it combines positive and negative. It combines successful pass completions and incompletions and interceptions. Okay. You want to measure an effective measure for that. You look at completion percentage. Okay. That'll tell you how often a pass is complete. What I want to know is when a pass is complete, what's the average gain that the teams either gain or allow. So, for example, Baltimore has been better at defending the run. The Bengals are better at the pass. The Bengals allow just 9.4 yards per pass completion. Baltimore 11.9. So that goes back to, again, some of your secondary issues as far as pass completion goes. My issue with Cincinnati's secondary is the tackling ability, but that's a statistic that I like to use when I'm comparing teams, especially where there figures to be a fair amount of throwing. I like both quarterbacks. I like the fact that both quarterbacks can run. Obviously, Lamar Jackson has a little bit more versatility, a little more mobility, but I'm with you on Cincinnati. I think they got a lot of confidence out of that win last week, albeit at Carolina. They needed that. Again, it's a key division game in a division that, well, right now it might say you might overlook, and I know you're down on them. I think I'm down on Cleveland as well, but certainly Pittsburgh and Baltimore figure to be there for the duration, at least as of they're playing right now. So this is a big game for Cincinnati to avoid a loss at home to a division rival that, I guess if they win, what would they both be 2-3 in the standings?
Yeah, kind of crazy to think about that because they were so highly regarded heading into the year. And what you said is absolutely correct. You pointed out how Baltimore is not as good defensively as their numbers suggest. According to the EPA, they're 19th in defense right now. So I think if you were to poll the average bettor or the average football fan and say, where would you rank the Ravens? Like top 10 defense, middle of the pack or bottom 10? I think most would say top 10.
I agree.
And then you'd have middle of the pack, and almost no one would say bottom 10, and they're pretty close to bottom 10. So all right, let's move on to the next game. We have the Bills at the Texans. So a couple of injury stuff here for the Bills. Terrell Bernard and Taron Johnson both limited in practice both days. It sounds like they're going to play. It's what the coach said. You never know. There could be setbacks, but the fact that they weren't downgraded throughout the week is nice. Khalil Shakir, though, DMP in practice both days. So that's something to watch out for. That's not going to make or break my pick here. But it's still, if there are other receiver injuries pop up, then you might be concerned. For the Texans, Joe Mixon was DMP twice. So there was some optimism that he could come back, but it might be Cam Akers again. And Andy, I had Evan on Tuesday, we were talking.
I got to go listen to that because I'm sure it was excellent.
Yeah, Evan's great. So we were talking about how bad the Texans play calling was against the Jaguars because there were so many times they ran on first and long, well, obviously first and 10, and then second and long with Cam Akers, and they just got no yards for the most part. And it might happen again if they're going to have Cam Akers. Joe Mixon's talented to bail them out in that situation, but with Cam Akers, he just can't get anything. So I'm someone who doesn't put any stock normally into running back injuries, but when you have such a big difference here, when Cam Akers is just so ineffective, that's going to make me more bullish on Buffalo. And I already like Buffalo. I think coming back off that humiliating loss, I think should really benefit them. And I think they're the stronger team here. So what are your thoughts on this game?
By the way, what you mentioned, I neglected to mention, but it was a thought that I had in that Baltimore game, the old "what goes around comes around," and that is the week before when Buffalo humiliated Jacksonville, they were playing their best game of the year, and then they were playing their worst game of the year the following week. It's hard to. I mean, that's what New Orleans did at the start of the season with those two 40-point one-sided wins against Carolina and Dallas. Impressive because it's very hard to play two outstanding games in a row. Dominating games like that with such huge margins, and that's exactly what we saw out of Buffalo last week after that rout of Jacksonville. They lost 35-10 at home to Baltimore after Buffalo had beaten Jacksonville by that big number. So maybe that same thing will happen, that we won't be able to see a repeat of what Baltimore did against Buffalo in that game that we just talked about against Cincinnati. In this game, I do like Buffalo as well. Again, I like them to bounce back after that poor effort at home against at Baltimore last week, that 35-10 loss. But it's also a play against Houston to the extent that I was disappointed at the way Houston played last week after being thoroughly outplayed in Minnesota the week before. They had a struggle to come back to win that game last week against a winless Jacksonville team that had not been playing especially well. And, they easily could have lost that game. And, if you're a quality team, now there are going to be times when quality teams don't bounce back after bad efforts. Look, we saw it with San Francisco. Well, after they lost at Minnesota, they bounced back nicely for about 52 minutes, and then they collapsed against the Rams at the end. But the way that Houston played against Minnesota, if they're going to be a legitimate contender, they're still a young team relative to like a San Francisco, for example, because C.J. Stroud just in his second year, coach just in his second year, etc. So it's as much a play. I'm uncomfortable with Houston right now, but I'm very comfortable with Buffalo. That's a very mature team, a very experienced team, and I would expect them to bounce back, and I would think it would be good enough to get a win, especially since the game is pick 'em or -1.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud really bailed them out last week because, like I said, they had those ineffective runs with Akers, and he would convert those 3rd and longs, and you could do that against Jacksonville, which has one of the worst secondaries in the NFL with Tyson Campbell injured. But Buffalo, they have strong cornerbacks on the outside, so it's going to be tougher here for Stroud. So glad we're on the same page here. This next game, I don't know what to make of it yet. Colts at the Jaguars. It seems like the sharp side would be Jacksonville, but it's not that much of a lean. There are some injuries here with the Colts. Ryan Kelly, Kenny Moore, and Kwity Paye were all DNP in practice twice so far. And then Anthony Richardson was limited. So I don't think.
How about Taylor?
Taylor's DNP twice as well.
Okay.
So I expect him to be out 2 or 3 games with the high ankle sprain. But I think so. As far as Richardson versus Flacco is concerned, I don't think that makes a difference as far as the spread. Like, I don't see the spread moving because of that. But I think that schematically, I would much rather have Flacco, because Flacco is more accurate and he can exploit the.
You're talking from the Colts standpoint, not from what Jacksonville would be facing. The Colts would rather have Flacco playing, in your opinion.
If I'm betting the Colts, I would rather have Flacco, just because Flacco is more accurate. He can exploit the Jacksonville secondary, where Richardson is so erratic, and he might make some big plays, but he could also throw it to the other team just as easily. So I guess this bad Jacksonville secondary for that reason, and also if Richardson plays and he's limited all week, he may not be 100%. So I don't want to back an injured quarterback. So if Richardson plays, it may seem like Jacksonville's a good side, but then again, Doug Peterson had those comments, and I don't know if you heard them, but he said he basically blame the players. He said, I'm not out there making plays. He kind of threw his players under the bus. So I don't know if the players are going to quit on him. That's the concern I have here if Richardson plays. So what are your thoughts on this one? Because I can't make any sense of this game.
I do like Jacksonville here. They've now lost 9 of their last 10 games, dating back to, I think they were 8-3 in the latter part of last season. So, and they're going to be on the road in Jacksonville, in London rather, the next 2 weeks. So, this is their one opportunity playing at home. Remember, they played 3 of their first 4 games on the road. Okay, the one game they played at home was week 2, the 18-13 loss to Cleveland. This is maybe their best chance at avoiding an 0-7 start. We don't know what they'll do in their games against what is it? What do they play? They play Chicago
and then New England.
So I'm not so sure that they could win either of those games, although it'll probably be close to pick them both of those games. But I've seen a little bit of improvement out of Jacksonville. And when you take a look at the games they've lost, I mean, they've had opportunities to win those games. They've been basically, with the exception of the Buffalo game, they were close. They led most of the game against Miami. They had their opportunities against Cleveland the following week, and I forget who the third week was, but it was another close loss that they had. I think it was either 3 or 4 point loss that they had. So I think it's a good spot for Jacksonville. I think Lawrence is starting to feel a little bit better. They're getting a little bit of a running game. I am concerned about the defense, but I'm concerned about Indianapolis' defense as well. So those are 2 offsetting concerns. And again, the injuries to Taylor and to Richardson, you pointed out with the Richardson versus Flacco. And of course, you now have, you had film on Flacco from last year, but I don't know that Pittsburgh was prepared for Flacco last week when he came in. I think Richardson threw like 4 passes before he had to leave the game. So I know he still saw the comeback that nearly won the game, that they had an opportunity at least late. I think they had possession after they fell down 27-24, but couldn't do anything with it against the Colts late in the game. It's a good spot for Jacksonville. Yeah, I just talked about the 2.5-point home favorites having that horrible record, but I think we have a desperate team here, and there is talent on this team. I'm not crazy about the coach, and I think Peterson is a little bit on the hot seat, and if they get that 0-7 start, he may not come back from London.
We were joking that he could be fired in the middle of the 2 London games.
He might be fired in the middle of the second game of the at halftime if they're having that much trouble. But yeah,
that'd be a little awkward. All right, it's like, hey, find your own way home. So I 2 questions for you here. One, are you worried about the comments Peterson made? Because that I don't know if they're going to quit on him. What do you think about that?
I would think that he probably regretted those comments, and I would think that he probably, if he's already lost the team, which many people think he has, those comments aren't going to do much to improve things. So I think he does have a big task ahead of him to rally things and basically say, you know what, I made those comments. They were sort of spontaneous. It just shows that I share your frustration, and I know you guys are better than the way that the results have shown. And let's get a chance this week before we go on the road. Let's show our home fans that we are the football team they thought we were through the first part of last season and prior to the start of this season. So maybe the players will buy into that. I was thinking about the comments that he was making that he did not give, I think, a 100% backing to Lawrence, I think, after the game last week.
Yeah. And my second question is, like, would you prefer a quarterback? Like, would you does one of the quarterbacks increase your bet on Jacksonville?
I don't know that would increase it as much as it might decrease it the other way. I'd much prefer to have Richardson start if I'm backing Jacksonville, because you pointed out the erraticness of Richardson, and we might see Jacksonville do some things that could rattle him a little bit, even though the defense hasn't played the way that we expected them to. I think the reason that if I were backing the Colts, I'd prefer Flacco is he's a mature veteran. He's basically doing what he did in Cleveland last year. He's basically doing what Andy Dalton can do in Carolina. He's basically doing what we're seeing Kirk Cousins do for Atlanta. He's got that stability. He's got that history of being, not an elite quarterback, but certainly more than a capable quarterback who can give you more than 2 or 3 good games in a row.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, so we're in agreement there that if you're betting the Jaguars, you'd rather see Richardson, especially given that he's not healthy. All right, this next game,
by the way, the availability of Taylor also would be a significant factor to me in that game.
Yeah, Sermon is not a very good running back. He might even be worse than Akers somehow. But anyway, this next one, I have nothing on this game. Just some minor updates. Dolphins at the Patriots. Jalen Phillips was ruled out for the year, which is, I think, it's kind of not funny. It's unfortunate, but I thought at the beginning of the year I read a wrong report saying that he would be out for the year, and so I handicapped the first.
So you were very good at predicting things back in August.
I know. I was handicapping the Jacksonville game as if you were out, and then I saw the injury report saying he was in. I was like, wait a second, I thought he was out for the year. So yeah, unfortunately, he is out for the year. For the Patriots, David Andrews has not practiced. Now maybe he could come back to practice on Friday, but he's their star center, the only good lineman they have. So if he's out, it's going to be even worse. But without Phillips, I don't know if they pressure the Patriots here. So I really don't know how you handicap this game. Maybe you have a strong feeling on this one, but this is an automatic fade for me for rotation.
Well, the strong feeling I have is that I can't play Miami. And when we see how important Tua is to that team in those back-to-back efforts the last couple of weeks since he got injured in the game against Buffalo, which they ended up losing one-sided also, but certainly the game against Seattle and the game last week as well, that there were some issues there that I cannot back Miami. New England continues to play hard. They just don't have an awful lot of talent. But how much talent do you need right now to beat a Miami team that is not getting that because of the lack of quarterback play, they're not getting what they expected out of those wide receivers because there's no respect for the Miami quarterback. And whoever it is, I guess, who was it? Boyle last week after Skylar Thompson got injured or something.
Yeah, it was almost Skylar White. We could say Mike White and Skylar Thompson. So
yeah,
and then it was Huntley last week too. So
Hundley, that's right, Tyler Hundley. I don't know if I can play New England, but I don't mind Jacoby Brissett. I don't mind if they have to go and give Derek May if Brissett can't complete it. I still think both of them are better than what Miami's going to be relying on, even though Miami has a far better talent. They need the quarterback to take advantage of that talent. Probably won't play the game because there will be other games I think that I'll like more. But I certainly know that if I do play the game, it won't be on Miami. And if anything, well, again, the total is like 35-36. I can't play under, but I would expect it to be a low-scoring game. So that might be enough to get me off the game. But I do like what Gerard Mayo is doing with limited talent in New England.
Well, to quote you, or paraphrase you at least, you said, well, you don't have to play every game. So
that's right.
You can
and the other thing I also say is don't ask bad teams to do something good for you, even against other bad teams.
I like that quote. Yeah, these are two awful teams, 31st and 32nd in my power rankings. The final game of the early slate, we have Cleveland, Washington here. I think Washington may be the candidate for the most overrated team in the NFL. Now, I love Jane Daniels. There's no knock on him. He's been phenomenal. You've heard all the stats, most accurate quarterback. It should be pointed out, though, that the EPA of the defenses he's played in the first 4 games, 21st, 22nd, 27th, and 30th. So he has not played a defense in the top 20.
Keep in mind one thing, Walter, that in those rankings, the performances that Washington had against those defenses account for 25% of those defensive totals. So they still have significant weight. Now, as we get deeper into the season and those bad rankings remain there in the mid to upper 20s and low 30s, then we can attribute it to more that defense. But right now, what Washington has done to those teams has a huge impact in those stats.
Yeah, I actually, that was in the back of my head, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should investigate how good these defenses are. And then I thought about them, like, okay, the Buccaneers, who just allowed 36 points tonight, the Giants, who have an awful secondary, good pass rush, awful secondary, the Bengals, who haven't been able to stop anyone this year, and then the Cardinals, who have a terrible defense. So I mean, this is their first test against the Browns. The Browns are 12th in defensive EPA. Myles Garrett not 100%, but he's still effective. So we'll see. We'll see how they play. I think the important thing for Cleveland is their offensive line. Can these guys get on the field? Because Jedrick Wills has barely played this year. Jack Conklin has not played a single game this year. And the Ethan Posick, their center, got hurt last year. All 3 missed practice Wednesday. However, all 3 were limited on Thursday. So a good sign. We'll see what happens on Friday. If 2 of these guys are in, I like Cleveland.
I've lost your audio.
Oh, can you hear me at all? Guys in the chat, Andy, can you hear me? Or guys in the chat, can you hear me? I don't know if this is Andy or me. Yeah, guys, let me know if we have technical difficulties here. So I will continue to talk as if you guys can hear me. But I like the Browns as long as 2 offensive linemen can play. So G Chuck says I can hear you, Walt. So I don't
know if I can be heard.
I can hear you. I can hear you, Andy. So yeah. I don't know why that is, but maybe.
I hear you now faintly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've been able to hear you the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, you're coming in very, very faintly right now, and okay. I did not adjust my volume.
Okay, they can hear you too. So
okay, I can hear you enough to be able to respond.
I will move closer to the computer here. So, all right. My what I was saying last was the 3 Browns offensive linemen who have been out. They we're limited in Thursday. So if two of them play, I like Cleveland a lot. If one of them is in, I've slight interest, and none of them are in, then I'm gonna probably pass in this game. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, the one thing I have about, I know you mentioned Washington being overrated somewhat, and I can somewhat see where that would come from, but the only counter that I'll have to that is, Dan Quinn's a pretty good coach. And this is his first year there, and he's known for a defensive coach, so we should see some defensive improvements over the course of the season. That being said, can Washington play a better game than they did against Arizona last week? Maybe this is, again, a team that I would normally like to go against, but I don't think all that much of Cleveland right now, especially with Deshaun Watson, and you mentioned the offensive line problems. So it's a game I have to pass unless I can come up with a reason, and I may come up with it, to look over the total in this one.
Okay, I get the concerns about Watson. He did play his best game of the year against the Raiders. Now I know it's a very low bar, but he did play his best game, and this is a great matchup for him. The Washington, as great as they are offensively, they're first in EPA. They are 32nd in defense. So
that's where the over comes in.
Right. So I'm playing Watson in DraftKings. So it's it's a tough pill to swallow, but I do think it's a good matchup for him. I'm playing Watson and Cooper. So we'll see. I'll probably lose the $100 buy-in, but I don't know. I think they're worth a shot because they're so cheap and they have such a great matchup. All right, so let's jump to the late afternoon slate here. Raiders and the Broncos. So I saw there was sharp money on the Broncos, moving this line from 2.5 to 3, despite there being public money on the Raiders. And
I think that was probably the Devontae Adams situation, which came up a day or so ago.
I think that's part of it. So I saw the injury.
Some device. Oh, and there was also the situation today. The situation today with Antonio Pierce being hit by the NCAA for sanctions for violations committed while he was an assistant at Arizona State. Not that necessarily should affect this game because it's colleges, but he's got other issues to worry about, on the side. That even if he never goes back to colleges, it could be a distraction from the preparation for this game. And I think that might explain the move.
I have another explanation for you. So let me read you this list. Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, Divine Diablo, Thayer Munford, DeCameron Richardson, Michael Mayer, Kanai Mwaga, Dylan Parham. These are all Raider players who missed practice both Wednesday and Thursday. That is 9 players, and then Colton Miller was DNP limited so far. So this is a team that's so banged up suddenly. And Adams, maybe that may not be the injury, it might be the trade stuff. If Max Crosby doesn't play, I know they won without Crosby and Adams last week, but still, it's tough. I don't want to back Denver though. I don't think Denver's that good. They caught 2 teams sleepwalking. They had the Buccaneers coming off the playoff revenge, and then they had the Jets going into London, plus the crazy weather they had there at the Meadowlands. So I think this would be Raiders or nothing for me. If they get a bunch of guys back on practice for practice on Friday, then I'm going to be willing to go to them. If all these guys are out, then this is a stay away. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those guys were dealing with some nagging injuries. So I've seen those lists on names for like the past week or so at various stages of readiness to play last week and this week. Now, I think it's been well publicized how the Raiders have dominated Denver in recent years. I think they've won 8 straight, 10 out of 11, and they're 12-1 against the spread in the last 13 meetings with the Broncos. And a number of those wins that they've had were as underdogs as they are in this situation. Now, the one advantage that Denver has is a much better defense. Although the Raiders' defense, when healthy, is passable, but certainly they would need Max Crosby in there. On the other hand, I give the Raiders with Minshew a quarterback edge. Bo Nix has been slow to develop. He did have his first touchdown pass in that weird game against the Jets. By the way, I don't know if you saw those halftime statistics for both of those teams. They were ugly. I think it was 46 yards for Denver and 102 or 103 yards in the first half for the Jets, 59 of which came on the drive before halftime that resulted in a field goal that gave them a 6-0 lead. But the advantage that I give the Raiders, I do give Minshew an advantage because of his veteran leadership and everything. But I also give them an edge in the kicking game, both punting and place kicking. And those edges in punting and place kicking, I think are even greater because of the high altitude in Denver. Probably adds, 5 yards to a punt and maybe 5 yards of a longer field goal attempt. And that could be the difference in what you figure would be a low-scoring game. The Broncos, by nature, are a low-scoring game because they don't have a very strong offense with the quarterback situation. I mean, I expect it to improve. And defensively, they've been very strong. And the Raiders are one-dimensional to the extent that they can have a passing game. They've not been really able to develop much of a running game, and possibly, I mean, the offensive line has something to do with it, but I think the fact that Josh Jacobs is no longer there also has a lot to do with it as well. So at 3, I'd be inclined to play the Raiders. I want to see what happens with this total. Right now, I've seen it around 37.5, 38, so it might qualify, if it doesn't go down any further, that it might qualify as an under, but I wouldn't. The spot says Denver, but the situation and the recent history, and with every game that's being played, I'm continuing to get greater respect for Drew Brees as a quarterback and less respect or admiration for Sean Payton as a coach.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love the you mentioned the first half stats in that Denver Jets game. I love the Bo Nix stat line. That was 7 of 15 for -7 yards at halftime. I want to put that on the shirt. It's just it's so tremendous. We have a question here from John. Is Davante Adams' hamstring injury bad enough he's not playing this week? You know what it is? I think it's that Willie Wonka.
He says that it is. He says he's rehabbing. The coach has been quiet. There was another big thing. I don't know. Did you hear the thing about Antonio Pierce on Twitter liking a quote that I don't know who said it, a player or maybe Davante himself said. It seems that Davante Adams has played his last down as a Raider, and apparently Antonio Pierce, whether it was deliberately or accidentally, put a like on it and refused to answer the question when the reporters asked him, did you intentionally do that like? And he gave the perfect Bill Belichick answer: I'm preparing for Denver.
Well,
but that's an internal distraction that we don't know how the players feel.
Yeah, I feel like there's an easy answer there. You just say my finger slipped. I didn't even know I liked it. It's just say that and it goes away. John.
And by the way, we talk about teams rallying around injured players and all that, and come through with a big effort. That might have been the Raiders' explanation for beating Cleveland last week, without Adams and without Crosby.
Yeah,
and they nearly lost that one because of a penalty that called back a touchdown.
Yeah, yeah, or the explanation is Cleveland is awful. So, John was kidding about this, but this reminds me of the Willy Wonka meme, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I'm starting to lose you again on the audio.
I don't know if you can hear this, but it was the Charlie.
Oh yeah, now maybe that's what it was, because now you're coming back at normal level.
Yeah, it was the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory meme where Willy Wonka's limping with his cane, and then he does a somersault and springs up. That could be Davante Adams when he's traded. So I imagine the hamstring will go very quickly when he is traded. All right, so
and by the way, it's a little bit premature to talk about the trade. I don't think it'd happen. But Raiders, what if the Raiders are 5-2 or 6-2? Then all of a sudden they have a chance to contend. Don't expect that to happen, but it would certainly make premature talk right now for Davante Adams.
Well, as someone who has Raiders over 6.5, that would make me very happy. So I would love to see that. So anyway, we have Cardinals and 49ers here. So some major injuries for the 49ers. George Kittle missed practice both days. Fred Warner missed practice both days. And George Kittle is the more famous player, obviously for fantasy purposes and stuff. But I think Fred Warner's injury is just so much more impactful, especially because Dre Greenlaw is also injured. So you have cluster injuries at linebacker, but Fred Warner is the heart and soul of that defense. Without him, that defense is far worse. And I feel like Arizona coming off that blowout loss to Washington, not sure what happened there. Maybe they were just exhausted from competing so hard against Detroit the previous week, but or who knows? Maybe Call of Duty, the new version came out, but I think that Kyler Murray is going to play much better against the defense that is without a lot of personnel here. And also, San Francisco has to play against Seattle upcoming on Thursday. So they could be a little bit distracted coming off a blowout win. So I love Arizona here. What are your thoughts on this game?
I've gone back and forth on this one because it seems to be a small price for the 49ers, who got a much-needed win, albeit against a limited New England team last week. It was still a bounce back from those back-to-back losses, especially that loss to the Rams, the way they lost the week before. They do have a lot of injuries. They're still a very talented team, and you still have to worry about the Arizona defense. We've seen the 49ers offense at least be able to do some decent things shorthanded the last couple of weeks, going back to that night game against who was it? I think it was the opening game against the Jets, actually, without McCaffrey. So we've seen the 49ers offense. The one game they struggled was really against Minnesota, who's turned out to be a much better defensive team as far as some of the key metrics are concerned than a lot of people expected coming into the season. The number 7.5. If the Cardinals defense, 49ers are a good scouting team, and if they picked up why Washington was so successful last week repeatedly against that Arizona defense, we might see some points out of this team. And if what you say, and I believe in what you said about the 49ers defense without Warren, we might see Arizona put some points up the board. So maybe I look over the total in this one. It's about 48 and a half right now. I think the last time I looked, there might be some value there. But then again, I think the higher scoring the game, the more it does favor the better defensive team, and even shorthanded Washington 49ers are the better defensive team.
Yeah, total's gone up to 49.5. So people have been betting the over. All right, so next game is Packers at the Rams. I feel like this is a classic sharps versus public game here, where the public is on the Packers. They expect them to beat the Rams easily because of previous results. And then the sharps are on the Rams. Not that I agree with the sharps here. The sharps can be wrong, obviously, but I think like Jordan Love was very rusty last week. Now he had some great stats, but a lot of that was in garbage time. I think it's premature to say that he's going to be 100%. Now he's going to be healthier this week than he was last week, so that gives him a better chance. And the Rams defense is very banged up, but the Rams have a lot of they're still very well coached. They still have Matthew Stafford and Kyron Williams. I feel like they can score on the Packers. So I'm not running to bet either side here. So what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I think the Rams clearly show how much they miss those two receivers that have missed the last couple of games. Which could play into a Green Bay defense that hasn't been terrible, even though Minnesota lit them up early last week. But then again, Green Bay made a nice little comeback in that half. What was it, 30? What was the score at halftime? 28-7, I think it was, in that game. And they came back to, make it a competitive final. It's kind of like Baltimore-Dallas the week before. If they played 5 more minutes, Green Bay maybe completes that comeback. So even in defeat, I liked what I saw out of Green Bay. And yeah, Love was rusty, and I think he needed that game. I have some concerns about the Rams and really some of the explosion they had against San Francisco to win that game was a bit of an aberration, although they did show some offense in that opening game at Detroit. What's keeping me off the game is I've seen some 3.5s out there. They're now down to 3 in a lot of places. If I were to play the game, I would still prefer Green Bay because I do like what I've seen defensively out of them for the most part this year, and I like LaFleur as a coach. McVay is a very solid coach, but he just doesn't have the kind of weapons on offense that he would like to have. And the fact that Green Bay has been such a good team at running the football and the defensive retirement for the Rams, Arnold was, I think, certainly being missed there. And I think if Green Bay can establish the run, that'll make it a little bit easier for Love to have success.
Yeah, the Rams revived DeAndre Swift's career last week with their awful tackling. Like, he had his best game of the season by far. He hadn't crossed 31 rushing yards in a single game, and he had 70 last week. Just wild how bad the tackling is there. All right, last of the late afternoon
And
games.
by the way, that's another thing, because the Packers have been able to run the ball so well, as they showed when Malik Willis was in there. They can limit the amount of passing they ask Love to do, and if you're only dropping back, or looking to run, 15 times instead of 36 times, it gives you a chance of staying healthy and being more effective.
Yeah, and they can run with Jacobs, and Emmanuel Wilson's look good in relief. So yeah, they can run it with those guys. All right, so Giants and Seahawks here. I was hoping for Malik Neighbors to return, because I think this is an awful spot for Seattle. Like, not only do they have to play against San Francisco on Thursday night, but travel-wise, in week 2 they were at New England, obviously East Coast. Then week 3 they travel back home to the West Coast to play a game. And then week 4, they go on the road to play in Detroit, so Eastern time zone, on Monday night. And then on a short week, they travel back to the West Coast to play the Giants here. So no relief here. I feel like a lot of jet lag potentially. They played such an emotional game against the Lions on Monday night, and now they're big favorites. This is a spot I don't like very much. It was the same situation that the Bengals were in week 3, when they battled the Chiefs so closely, and then they were huge favorites against the Washington, and then they lost outright. So I think Seattle could be very flat here. Unfortunately, Malik Neighbors doesn't seem like he's going to play. He was DNP twice, and I read a report today saying it was going to be an uphill battle for him to play. So he is the Giants' entire offense. I don't know how they're going to function without him. If he were playing, I would be all over the Giants, but the fact that he's not playing, it gives me some pause. So I'm hoping you can maybe talk me into the Giants here. What are you thinking here?
I'm actually looking a little bit more at Seattle. Part of the reason was I didn't really care for Seattle prior to the game. I was on Detroit on Monday night, mainly because Seattle had not played a very difficult schedule. They beat Denver in the opener at home with a rookie quarterback, Bo Nix. Then they go on the road and need overtime to beat New England. And then they come back and beat, I could say toothless Miami, but it was Tua-less, Tua-less Miami. So they hadn't really proven anything, and I thought they played very well in Detroit. They never let the game really get out of hand. They were able to match Detroit in a lot of scoring opportunities, and so I'm gaining a little bit more respect for Seattle, especially the offense that I had a lot of questions about. And the Giants, really, I don't see what they bring to the table, especially without Neighbors. I mean, I'm still not sold on Daniels, and I was in favor of taking him out of Duke when he came out. He had some good coaching at the quarterback, but he's never really developed. He had a lot of turnover issues, not quite as bad as now as they had been back then. So you talk about the travel aspect for Seattle, but you've also got the Giants going across the country. I mean, where have they played on the road so far this year? Let me see if I've got that.
Yeah, I can pull it up right here. So the Giants, week 1 they played at home against Minnesota.
Right.
Week 2 at Washington.
Right.
Then week 3 at Cleveland. Week 4.
So this is their first. So this is their first time outside the Eastern Time Zone, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, at Cleveland, at Washington. Yeah.
Which is easy, much easier to go from east to west than west to east, as I know from my trips to Vegas.
It's easier to go from west to east, you're saying?
No, it's easier to go from east to west.
I don't know, because it depends on your body clock. Because if you're going from the time zone, when your watch says 9 o'clock, it's midnight body time. If you're only been there, 24, 48 hours, because it's a big myth that teams struggle when they go from West Coast to the East Coast and they play the early game. If you go back and do the research, as a number of folks have, it's about a 50-50 thing. And usually the 50% of the teams that handle it well are the good teams, and the 50% of the teams that handle it badly going west to east are the bad teams, which would explain a lot of things. It's kind of like the old thing when they said, Tampa Bay has not won a game. They're like 2-33 under when the temperature's under 40 degrees. Well, they're not far. Back in those days, they weren't far from 2-33 in any degree, because they were a very bad football team for about 10, 12 years. So sometimes you're getting 75% of the full context. But getting back to this game, not sure that I will play Seattle, but that's the side I would be looking at. And if I don't play them straight up, or if I don't play them minus the 6, I'll certainly have them. If the line stays 6 or goes 6.5, I'll certainly have them hooked up somewhere in a teaser.
Okay, that makes sense. So going back to the West Coast, East Coast thing, Jim Harbaugh, as coach of the 49ers and Chargers, He's 7-1 against the spread in East Coast 1:00 starts. So yeah, I think it's a coach.
And the one, I guess, was the Pittsburgh game.
Yep, that was the one loss
when they had the injuries.
Yep, that was the one loss. Yeah, and so I think it's a coach by coach basis. Like some coaches were awful.
Well, that's also sort of like teams.
Right.
Good and bad teams. Good. Yep. Of course, generally, good teams have good coaches for the most part.
That's true. Yeah. I think Seattle was awful on the East Coast on their home grin. And then when Pete Carroll came in, he became great. Yeah. They became great on the East Coast. So, of course, that was with Russell Wilson, too. So that had something to do with it. But yeah, you're right. I think that's it's a little overblown. It is about 500 over the years.
It's overblown, but the concept intuitively makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just that the reality doesn't. The concept does not actually match the reality, but that doesn't mean that the concept doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think you can look at like the bad teams in those situations, and that could make them even worse than they already are. That's how I look at it. And the same thing as an East Coast team playing on the West Coast at night. Usually the West Coast team tends to do well, but if there's a good East Coast team, they can certainly win. But if they're bad, then they're more likely to get blown out.
Now it is a little bit different because West Coast games, even on night games, they'll start like around 5:30 local time, which is only 8:30 Eastern time. So whatever jet lag or whatever usually doesn't affect you when your body time is basically 8 o'clock, even though your watch says 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I feel like usually it's in the second half they fall apart when it's like 10 o'clock on the East Coast. But they're not crazy people like me who stay up till 5 a.m. So there
are more than you think, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they're crazy.
If I had to play an East Coast game on a West Coast body clock, I don't know how I'd function. So I don't know how they do it, but yeah.
Remember, even at 10 a.m. starts Eastern time, it's 7 a.m. West Coast time. So I don't know what the routine is for players getting up early West Coast time. That by the time it gets to be 7 o'clock, that you may have been up a couple hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm dreading that 9:30 start this week. I really am. It's gonna be brutal. Anyway,
I think we feel 6:30 start out here.
That's all we say. Like people on the West Coast get screwed over here.
Of course, some of us, not me, but some of us are just getting home at 6 a.m. So on a Saturday night. So.
Oh, yeah. Are you sure not you? Or you're not partying?
I'm not going to admit to anything. I shall neither confirm nor deny.
Fair enough. All right. Sunday night game. Cowboys at Steelers. So there's some major injuries here. Obviously, DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons got hurt last Thursday. Yeah. Parsons did not practice at all this week so far. It sounds like he's going to be out. Now, the Steelers lost James Daniels, their best offensive lineman, but they have good news that Isaac Seumalo, who has not played yet this year, has practiced fully twice. So they lose one great guard, they get another one back. So almost a wash. Although Daniels is a better player than Seumalo, but still they get a starter back, which is going to be helpful. I like the Steelers here. I think Dallas is just ravaged by not only injuries but the offseason departures they have in the offensive line. Tyler Guyton, left tackle, he's just been a turnstile, and he's going against TJ Watt. It feels like the biggest mismatch of the week, probably. So I like the Steelers here. They're a short favorite. As long as they're under 3, it just makes sense to take them. Who do you like in this game?
Yeah, and in fact, I just checked. Parsons is currently listed as doubtful on the injury report, and most people do expect him to miss the game. No, I'm with you on Pittsburgh. That's the game that I liked. In fact, I think the advanced line in that game for some reason had Dallas a 1-point favorite 2 weeks ago, or a week ago Tuesday, which I didn't understand because I've liked Pittsburgh and I've liked what they've done this year. I even liked them. I think I touched upon it before in their game last week. The fact that that they were down, 17-0 in that game. At Indianapolis when that was before Richardson went out and Flacco led them to that nice lead. They still came back and made it a competitive game. They didn't just say, "Hey, we're 3-0. We're not playing our best." We were somewhat surprised with the coaching change, with the quarterback change. Even though normally you're prepared for the backup, but I don't think you're necessarily prepared for a backup to come in the first quarter. That I couldn't take away. I couldn't take away too many negatives from Pittsburgh in that game because of the situation and what caused the game to unfold the way that it did. Again, I didn't like the way Dallas struggled in the game against the Giants. Settling for field goals instead of touchdowns a couple of times, and Pittsburgh's a physical team. Parsons will be missed. I like the matchup you talked about with T.J. Watt. I like the relatively small impact on the negative impact on the offensive line because of the injury and the replacement for the Steelers. And I've always liked Mike Tomlin as a coach. I mean, he can. It was one thing when he had Big Ben, at quarterback. Although remember, Roethlisberger came out of Miami of Ohio. He was well thought of, but it was still a MAC school. He wouldn't come out of like a USC, or a quarterback factory like a Florida State or whatever. And yet he had a great career. And you don't know how much Tomlin had to do with it because of his defense. But the point is, even after Ben retired several years ago, the Steelers were still a very competitive team and made it into the playoffs. And of course, we know about the record. So if the two coaches come down to being a difference in this game, I do like Pittsburgh. I also don't like the fact that Dallas has yet to been able to show that they can have a solid running game, and I think that affects Dak Prescott's ability to do some of the things that he does best. I just like Pittsburgh in this spot. I just think they're the better team.
Yeah, and to circle back, this is one 2.5 point favorite we do like at home, where the public is actually on Dallas here. So it's not like the public is taking the bait here or anything. So we have a $3 super chat from John Sanders. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate the contributions. Just means a lot. Like I said, YouTube ads pay nothing. It says Jerry Jones lands on midfield with his helicopter.
No, but he might land on Mike McCarthy.
Well, yeah, we actually our Charlie Campbell reported in the offseason that Jerry Jones wanted to fire McCarthy, but he was talked out of it. So maybe he should fire the guy who talked him out of it.
Who talked him out of it? Yeah,
exactly. I don't know who that was, but he did want to interview Jason Witten for the job. So I don't know if he's going to find something better. But thanks, John. Speaking of helicopters, we're going to have something about helicopters and stuff on the Monday night talk next week, which I already wrote up. Sue's asking what time will be the kickoff for the Ukraine game.
That's next year.
Yeah, maybe they'll flex it to 10 a.m. Lifetime. Maybe they'll do a double header in the morning, 6:30 a.m. and then 9:30. How bad would that be?
Hey, they might do it 3:30 and 6:30.
Yeah, exactly.
Our time.
Tomlin greater than McCarthy, 5 greater than. Yeah, it might not be enough there. I think much better. And yeah, Jones landing his helicopter in the middle of Cowboys practice.
I don't know. I wouldn't say McCarthy's a bad coach. It's just that he's not a good coach given the talent he's had to work with over the years. They should have been more than 2 Super Bowls with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh yeah, that's my co-host on a Wednesday, Kenny, who does the fantasy analysis. He had one of the greatest rants about Mike McCarthy I've ever heard. It was like a 10-minute rant, and I was dying the whole time. And unfortunately, we had to delete it because he's in academics, and it was a betting podcast, so we had to delete the show. And it's a shame that it's gone because it would have been one of the I would watch it like over and over again. It was so great.
Can you post the transcript as an anonymous contribution?
It's all gone. It's gone, unfortunately. It's
not even saved on your hard drive.
No, I don't save these. This is just uploaded right away. So it's a real shame that it's lost in the ether. So yeah.
Kind of like a dozen thoughts that I have a day. They just get lost somewhere and I can't bring them back. And they all sound good at the time.
I have the same thing. I try to write stuff down on the phone. Or I don't know if you watch the Seinfeld episode.
Try using a notepad. It's easier.
Yeah, Jerry. Did you watch the Seinfeld episode where Jerry wrote stuff down on his notepad at night because he had a great idea, and then no one could read it?
Yeah.
So yeah,
he couldn't even remember what it was. He couldn't read anything there.
Yeah, he kept asking everyone, and someone's like, Knicks 108, Jazz 107.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, Monday night game, we have Saints at the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 5.5 point favorites. I don't really have an injury report yet because there's only been 1 day of practice, and I really don't look at the first day of practice injury reports because a lot of veterans rest and you just never really know. But I still like the Saints here. The Chiefs seldom win by margin, especially out of the division in early parts of the season. Seems like when they're favored by 5.5, they win by 3.
Your volume is down again.
Sorry, when the when they're favored by 5.5, they win by 3. When they favored by 7, they win by 6. Like this Chiefs team seldom covers.
Up a little more.
Yeah, so they it's just like this year has just been so frustrating with the Chiefs. They week one they played well against the Ravens, but week 2 they could have easily lost to the Bengals with Joe Burrow. Week 3 against Atlanta, if Raheem Morris kicks a field goal on the penultimate drive, they find a way to win the game. Week 4 against the Chargers are up 10-0 despite missing half their roster. So the Chiefs team is 4-0, but they've been pretty unimpressive as 4-0 is concerned. If you look at the metrics, you would expect the 4-0 team to be at the top. The Chiefs are ranked 7th right now, so not an amazing team, and the Saints are right behind them at 10th. So the spread, I think, if just according to the metrics, is too high. It should be like, just according to EPA, it should be -2.5 or so, and it's -5.5. So I think this is too high. The Saints have been very explosive offensively. I think it'll be a tight game. I think it'll be decided by 3, as most Chiefs games usually are. So yeah, I'm on the Saints. So who do you like here?
Yeah, and in fact, if you take a look at Kansas City, their point production has actually come down. Not that points scored is necessarily a great indicator. 27 against Baltimore, 26 against Cincinnati, 22 against Atlanta, 17 against the Chargers. Now, of course, New Orleans we talked about earlier. I mentioned the 47-44 the first 2 games. 12 points against the Eagles in a 3-point loss, and 24 in that late last field goal 2-point loss at Atlanta last Sunday. So I agree wholeheartedly that this is, and by the way, of course, we now know that Rice is out for a number of weeks for Kansas City, which just further exacerbates the situation after losing Pacheco, the running back, for the season, although we'll see how Hunt does over the next few games. But I also like New Orleans. I'm not sure that I would pick them to win the game, though I wouldn't be shocked, because Kansas City just has a way of either getting good calls by the refs or by making the great plays at the end. Right, it'll be, who do you want the last 2 minutes of a game? Brady, or Manning, for that matter, to many. Well, now it's Mahomes. Who would you like to have when you need it's not who would you like to have at quarterback if you're looking to protect the lead and run out the clock. It's who would you like at quarterback if you need to come from behind to tie or win the game. And that's where I think Mahomes comes in and does it as well as anybody ever has. But yes, I agree that 5.5 is almost a no man's land. And I don't know if the public has done all that much moving in this game on the line, but it basically says, let the public decide, will they go to back the home team Chiefs, or will they acknowledge that much like we saw last year, it was not the same Chiefs team last year that they were the year before, but a lot of that had to do with the talent, especially at receiver with all the passes that were dropped. The defense is not as tight as it was last year for Spagnuolo, but they still managed to win games. But again, they've had difficulty winning by margins, and the Saints, Saints could be 4-0. I think the Saints could legitimately be 4-0, and the Chiefs could be 2-2 or 3-1.
Yep.
Remember, they lost that at Baltimore. They lost that game by that half inch on the line on the toe. Well, It would have gone into overtime most likely, unless. I think didn't Harbaugh say that he would have gone for 2 if they scored that touchdown?
When Likely appeared to score the touchdown, Harbaugh raised his hand and said signal for 2, and I was losing my mind because I had the Chiefs at -2.5.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going crazy, and I was thankful that unfortunately they ended up covering. But yeah, I think you're right. And if that were the case, if the Saints were 4-0 and the Chiefs were 2-2, this line would not be 5.5. It would be 3.5. So we're getting some value here, I think. Despite I think the public probably looks at this and says, oh, only Chiefs -5.5, they should be able to win. That's, at least I think so. I don't know. I'm not sure.
When you take a look at Kansas City, okay, they are 4-0 straight up, and based on a 7-point line last week, although it was 7.5 in many places until game time, they are. My records show them at 2-1-1 against the spread. They covered against Baltimore only because they didn't get that last touchdown confirmed. They covered against Atlanta because of that non-pass interference penalty at the end zone that likely would have put the ball on the 1-yard line, and Atlanta probably goes in for a touchdown and wins that game. They covered against. Oh no, I'm sorry, they didn't cover against Cincinnati. They were laying 6.5, and they actually came back from 3 down to win 26-25. And then against the Chargers last week, they were basically not covering the entire game. They get the push because the line closed at many places at 7, but they were not covering for most of the game. So you take a look at Kansas City, and that's why I wonder how much the public will back Kansas City. They may still will, because they take a look and they say, well, at least according to the closing line, they're still profitable, 2-1-1, you know. So I'll keep on them. Now, because they could easily be 0-4, and if they were 0-4 based upon the closing lines and the records and the lines that you see published in the various betting publications, which may have them at 2-1-1, or maybe 2-2 or something like that, they won't negatively react to Kansas City because they're still the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right. Yeah. So I do think the public will come in on the Chiefs. We'll see. John says the winner gets Devontae Adams. Maybe they can have a side bet here. that'd be interesting. All right, that's about it for today's show. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts here, or do you want to talk about your site, thelogicalapproach.com?
Yeah, we're getting set to, in fact, I'll probably be doing it after we're done recording the podcast, put up the weekly statistics that I like to provide. I was waiting an extra week, but now everything is all set to do it, and I'll be putting up there. They just go to thelogicalapproach.com, scroll down the page. I think it's called, let's see if we can scroll down there for me a little bit there. Keep going. Right there where it says current matchups and stats. If you click on that, you'll have my weekly spreadsheet. It'll be the last one I have up there is from last year, because this will be the first one for this season. And you can see some of the unique stats that I have there. I have something called Factor X that I've talked about before, that basically tries to correlate yards gained and points scored. The theory being, if you lead the league in yards, you should lead the league in points. But of course, we know that that's not always true, because you may be inefficient and converting yards into points, or you may be getting more points because your defense is contributing, getting turnovers, setting up good field position on kick returns, etc., like that, and inefficiencies defense. And I find that to be a good tool in evaluating why some teams seem to be playing better than their record, and it's not explained by the rushing and passing stats.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely check this out, guys. I put a link in the description, thelogicalapproach.com, pretty easy to remember. But in case you forget, it's in the description. So yeah, guys, thanks so much for watching and commenting. Really appreciate it. Thanks especially to John Sanders for the $3 super chat. And please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. All that would be really appreciated. And yeah, we'll be back on Saturday. Unfortunately, no Tom on Saturday. He has to go out of town, so I'll be flying solo on Saturday. But yeah, looking forward to that. And then
will that be before or after the wedding?
Oh, it's engagement
Saturday.
party. It's engagement party, not the wedding.
You'll still be loaded. Will it be before or after the party?
Oh, it's after. I have a rule.
I'm going to tune in for that.
Well, it's not going to be as entertaining, because I have a rule that I don't drink during football season, which is some people would say, oh, I only watch football to drink. So
Australian football season is over.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I will be back on the wagon come January, but yeah, no, I don't want to like cloud my mind and like try, because I'm trying to like figure everything out here.
What time does that usually get posted, by the way? The Saturday evening one.
We go live around 10:30 Eastern. So it might be a little bit.
Where do I go? Do I go to what? WalterFootball.com?
No, you just go to YouTube and type in
Walter YouTube. Football. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Or my Twitter. I'll have a link there on Twitter. So
I will listen to that after I listen to the Circa Sports contest report.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, guys, we'll be back on Saturday for that, and full week next week as well. So yeah, looking forward to that. Good luck with your bets if you don't listen on Saturday. I hope you guys have a great week of betting. And once again, Andy, thank you so much for joining me. So yeah, have a good night, everyone, and I'll talk to you later.